Welcome to Onigashima, everyone. Sober Oni of G&A Reviews here with a servant spotlight for your favorite anatomical abomination, Raikou. We'll be examining her stats and skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize her effectively, and an overall grade comparing her to how she stacks up to the other 5-star servants. I also have a full guide for Onigashima event up on the channel, so do check that out right after this. But for now, on to Raikou's stats. Raikou has a max HP of 13,500, which is average for a 5-star berserker, but pretty low overall compared to the other 5-star servants. Her max attack of 11,556 is again average compared to the other 5-star berserkers, but when you factor in the 1.1 times berserker damage modifier, her effective attack becomes 12,711, very high compared to the other 5-star servants. Taking a look at her skills, her first skill is Eternal Arms Mastery, rank A+. It increases her crit star gather rate for 3 turns between 3,000 to 6,000%, depending on level. Her second skill is Mana Burst Lightning, rank A, which increases her Buster Card effectiveness for 1 turn between 20 to 30%, and applies Evade for 1 turn, depending on level. And finally, her last skill is Mystic Slayer, rank A, which applies a special attack buff against demonic enemies for 3 turns, and applies a special attack buff against Sky and Earth servants for 3 turns, excluding Demi and Pseudo servants, both between 30 to 50%, depending on level. Taking a look at her passives, she has Magic Resistance rank D, which increases debuff resist by 12.5%, Madness Enhancement rank EX, which increases Buster Card effectiveness by 12%, Riding rank A+, which increases Quick Card effectiveness by 11%, and Divinity rank C, which applies damage plus 150. As for her deck and Noble Phantasm, she has an Arts Buster deck with Quick Arts Buster Buster and a Buster Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm is Go Shorai Tenmo Kaikai, which increases critical star drop rate for 1 turn between 100 to 300% depending on overcharge, and deals heavy damage to all enemies with between a 300 to 500% damage modifier depending on level. Taking a closer look at her cards, we see that her Quick Card hits 3 times, her Art hits 4 times, her Buster hits once, and her Extra Attack hits 5 times. She has a Noble Phantasm gain rate of 0.46% and a star rate of 4.9%. Overall, this gives her average star generating, although with her Noble Phantasm she does generate a large amount of stars, very similar to Drake. And she has some good Noble Phantasm gain for a berserker, but it's pretty average overall. Mama is home, and like most berserkers, Raikou is built purely for damage. However, unlike most berserkers that just rely on raw attack buffs and hitting things as hard as they can, Raikou's kit is much more specialized. Her first skill is Eternal Arms Mastery, and it's the same as Lancelot's. The massive buff to star weight that it gives ensures that she can be able to collect crit stars reliably in almost any team comp, and crit stars count for a huge portion of Raikou's damage, as she does lack the usual 3 Buster Card deck that most berserkers have, and crits on her arts and quick cards allow her to charge her Noble Phantasm much faster. Because the skill has a short cooldown and lasts for 3 turns, Raikou can be a very consistent crit servant. However, her focus isn't just based on crits like Lancelot. Raikou also packs 2 huge damage buffs. Mana Burst Lightning provides both a good damage buff for your Noble Phantasm and an evade, very similar to Jack's quick buff. This is both your best offensive and defensive skill, so you'll need to make sure to use it appropriately since the cooldown is somewhat long, and when it's on cooldown you'll be very vulnerable defensively. Finally, Mystic Slayer is Raikou's other specialty skill. It grants a huge 3-turn damage buff against Sky and Earth servants and demonic enemies. A huge chunk of servants fall under the Sky and Earth category, so this skill is a pseudo anti-servant skill, identical to Tesla's Noble Phantasm overcharge effect. In addition, as some of you might have noticed with Rama, a huge chunk of regular enemies fall under the demonic category. Essentially, this skill gives Raikou bonus damage against most enemies and servants in the game. For skill order, it's a tough call because all 3 of her skills are top tier A+ skills, but personally I recommend leveling Mana Burst first since it's your most consistent source of damage and you're going to want the shorter cooldown on the evade, followed by Mystic Slayer for more damage, and then finally Eternal Arms Mastery as even at level 1 it provides a huge buff to your star weight. Raikou's Noble Phantasm is an AoE Noble Phantasm that has the added benefit of providing crit stars despite being a Buster Noble Phantasm, so it's very similar to Drake's, and the higher the overcharge, the more crit stars you're going to get, so it's better to save this until the end of a Noble Phantasm chain. The crit stars you get from your Noble Phantasm can then be used during your next turn to give Raikou incredible burst damage from crits. On top of that, Raikou's Noble Phantasm itself also deals incredible damage despite being AoE because of her Mana Burst and Mystic Slayer skills. This makes Raikou the absolute strongest wave clearer in the game. She's strong enough to even take out waves of enemy servants during boss rushes with her Noble Phantasm, and this is what makes Raikou great. She has so many ways of dealing damage, and she can deal huge damage to all enemies simultaneously. Thanks to her Eternal Arms Mastery, good Noble Phantasm gain, and crazy strong Noble Phantasm without any drawbacks on it, she is both the best crit berserker and the best wave clearing berserker in the game in my opinion. She isn't perfect and she does have a few glaring weaknesses. For one thing, she is female, divine, riding, and a sky or earth servant, so she is a magnet for bonus damage. Also, while she is able to produce crit stars for herself with her Noble Phantasm, her base star generating isn't high enough to be self-sufficient, so she'll need to rely heavily on a star generator to get the most out of her Eternal Arms Mastery. But the biggest issue is her lack of a traditional berserker Buster deck, which does dampen her damage considerably compared to the other berserkers. Raikou may be great, but she is still a berserker, so keep that in mind when you're designing your team. She absolutely needs defensive supports to stay alive, so bring Hans, Media Lily, Waver, Tamamo, Mosh, Nero Bride, Dayon, or Iris Veil. You'll also want to pair her with a nice attack or crit buffing servant. Again, Hans, Waver, and Nero Bride are ideal, as are Caesar, Shakespeare, Nightingale, Shuten, Iskander, and post-strengthening quest Liz and Steno. And lastly, if you want to take advantage of her crits, then you're going to need a star generator like Jack or Fuma for more consistency, but art star generators like Shiki, Emiya Assassin, Edison, Hans, and Shuten are great too because they allow for more arts chains, which will potentially allow more Noble Phantasm spam for Raikou. Raikou's Bondcraft Essence is Dojigiri Yasusuna. It increases party buster card effectiveness by 10% and party crit damage by 15%. This is perfect for Raikou. It's essentially a mini Victor from the Moon for the whole team. I recommend also considering Kaleidoscope, Halloween Princess, and Golden Sumo. All three are ideal for farming and wave clear, which are Raikou's specialties. If you want to focus more on overall damage, then Limited Zero, Victor from the Moon, and Gudao are perfect for maximizing crit and Noble Phantasm damage. And finally, for defense, nothing beats Volume Hydrangea for a Berserker. Overall, Raikou is really strong, one of the best servants in the game hands down. She's a powerhouse berserker that can reliably crit, which is scary in and of itself, but coupled with the fact that she doesn't need to crit to be effective because her skills are so strong and give her huge anti-servant and anti-enemy buffs, it's near game-breaking. And she can also be used for practically any quest with great efficiency because she's a top tier farmer and a top tier boss killer, making her incredibly versatile. She may not have the most efficient deck, and she's a bit heavy on the bonus traits, but those are small downsides to pay for an otherwise monumental upside. She's just not a fair servant, so she gets an A+ from me. I'd rank her right below Ku Alter on the list of strongest berserkers, but only just barely, and even so there are many instances where Raikou will be much more useful over Herc or Ku Alter. And those are my thoughts on Raikou. Personally, I think she is the Swiss Army knife of servants, and she's kind of ideal for any situation because her skill set is so ridiculously good. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know if you plan on rolling for her. Check out the Onigashima event guide if you haven't already because it's a pretty complicated event. Link is on screen and in the description below. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over at our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter. And I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.